A millionaire CEO mocked the janitor's business ideas in front of his entire executive team. 6 months later, she walked into his office and bought his entire company for $1, then offered him the only job available, night janitor. This is the story of how the smartest person in the building was the one everyone ignored, and how one woman's quiet genius became the loudest victory of all. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. It's incredible to see our Deep Stories family growing across the globe. If you believe that genius can hide in unexpected places, that revenge doesn't have to be cruel to be satisfying, and that sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who change everything, hit that subscribe button right now. This is David and Maya's story. A tale of arrogance, humiliation, hidden brilliance, and the discovery that true intelligence isn't about credentials. It's about character. Let's begin. David Preston stood at the head of the conference table in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Preston Technologies, looking out at the Seattle skyline with the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly challenged in his life. At 42 years old, he'd built his tech company from a startup to a mid-sized firm worth $50 million. Or at least, it had been worth that much 2 years ago. Now the numbers were telling a different story. But David refused to listen to numbers that didn't confirm what he already believed about himself. The quarterly board meeting had just ended, and it hadn't gone well. Revenue was down 18%. Client retention was at an all-time low. The company's flagship product, a cloud-based project management system, was losing market share to newer, more innovative competitors. David's chief financial officer had used the word unsustainable 3 times during her presentation. The board had given him 6 months to turn things around or they'd vote to sell the company. 6 months. David had built this company in 6 years. How dare they give him an ultimatum? His management team filed out of the conference room, their expressions carefully neutral, each of them avoiding eye contact. David knew they'd been updating their resumes for months. Let them. He didn't need people who lacked vision. He needed people who believed in his genius, who understood that his methods had worked before and would work again. David loosened his tie and returned to his desk, pulling up the latest analytics report. The numbers stared back at him with brutal honesty. Churn rate up, customer satisfaction down, innovation index flatlined. His company was dying, slowly but certainly, like a plant that had stopped receiving water months ago and was only now beginning to wilt visibly. There was a soft knock on his door. David looked up, irritated. It was nearly 8 p.m. Everyone should have gone home by now. The door opened slightly, and a woman in a gray janitor's uniform peered in. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She pushed a cleaning cart ahead of her. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Preston," she said quietly. "I can come back later if you're still working." David waved her in dismissively, already returning his attention to his computer screen. "No, it's fine. I'll be here another hour at least. Just work around me." The janitor, her name tag read Maya, nodded and began emptying his wastebasket. David barely noticed her. In his mind, she was part of the building's infrastructure. No more worth paying attention to than the HVAC system or the elevator. Maya moved quietly around his office, dusting surfaces, replacing paper towels in his private bathroom, refilling his coffee station. David continued working, or trying to work, his mind circling the same problem over and over, how to fix a company that seemed determined to fail despite his leadership. After several minutes of silence, a voice spoke from near the window. "Have you considered pivoting to a modular architecture?" David's head snapped up. The janitor, Maya, was standing near his whiteboard where he'd sketched out his product roadmap during the board meeting. She was looking at his diagrams with an expression that could only be described as analytical. "Excuse me?" David said, his voice sharp with disbelief. Maya seemed to realize she'd spoken out loud. She looked startled, almost frightened, like she'd broken some rule she'd been careful to follow until now. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, moving away from the whiteboard. I shouldn't have said anything. I'll finish cleaning and get out of your way. But David was already out of his chair, walking toward her with the kind of aggressive energy that made his employees nervous. He stared at her, really seeing her for the first time. She was short, maybe 5'3", wearing a uniform that was slightly too large for her frame. Her hands, he noticed, were small but looked strong. And there was something in her eyes, intelligence maybe, or awareness, that didn't match the dismissive mental category he'd placed her in. "What did you just say?" David demanded. Maya swallowed, her hand gripping the handle of her cleaning cart. "It's nothing. I apologize for speaking out of turn." "No," David said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "You said something about modular architecture. I want to hear you explain that. This should be entertaining." Maya's expression shifted slightly, a flash of something that might have been anger, quickly suppressed. "I really should go, Mr. Preston. I have other offices to clean." David stepped closer, deliberately invading her space. "You work for this company, don't you? Even as a janitor? Then I'm asking you a direct question about our business. Explain what you meant, or I'll report you to your supervisor for insubordination." It was cruel, and David knew it was cruel, but he was in a foul mood, and this was somehow satisfying, putting someone in their place, reminding them of the hierarchy that kept the world organized and predictable. Maya met his eyes for a long moment. Then very quietly she spoke. "Your current product architecture is monolithic. Everything is bundled together in one massive system. That worked 5 years ago when you were targeting mid-sized companies with relatively simple needs. But now your clients have diverse requirements, and your competitors are offering specialized tools that integrate seamlessly with each other. You're losing market share because you can't customize fast enough, and your system is too rigid to adapt." David stared at her. She'd just summarized his company's core problem in 3 sentences, a problem his executive team had been dancing around for 6 months without naming directly, and, Maya continued, her voice still quiet but gaining confidence, "a modular architecture would let you break your system into independent services. Clients could adopt only the modules they need. You could innovate faster on individual components, and you'd reduce the technical debt that's currently making every update take 3 times longer than it should. You could start with your authentication and user management layer, decouple it from the rest of the system, and prove the concept before committing to a full restructure." The silence in David's office was absolute. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed in the Seattle streets. In the office, the only sound was the quiet hum of David's computer. "Who are you?" David said finally, his voice cold. Maya seemed to come back to herself, as if she'd been somewhere else for a moment, somewhere she'd promised herself she wouldn't go again. "I'm just the janitor, Mr. Preston," she said softly. "And I need to finish my rounds. Have a good evening." She pushed her cart toward the door, moving quickly, like she wanted to escape before something worse happened. "Wait," David called after her. "How does a janitor know about technical architecture?" Maya paused at the door, her back still turned to him. "Before this, I had a different job, a different life. But that was a long time ago. I'm sorry I spoke up. It won't happen again." And she was gone, the soft squeak of her cartwheels fading down the hallway. David stood alone in his office, staring at the whiteboard where Maya had been looking. Modular architecture, independent services. Decouple the authentication layer. She'd identified his company's entire problem and sketched a solution in under 90 seconds, speaking in technical language that most of his engineers would struggle to articulate so clearly. Who the hell was this woman? David pulled up his company's employee directory and searched for Maya. Several results came up. Maya Chen in accounting, Maya Patel in HR, Maya Rodriguez in customer support. He refined the search. Maya, janitorial services. One result, Maya Santos. Employee number J7743, hired 14 months ago through Building Care Solutions, the contracted cleaning company. No other information available in the system. Contractors didn't get full profiles. David made a note on his phone. Find out about Maya Santos, janitor. Then he returned to his desk, but he couldn't focus on his work. Her words kept echoing in his mind. Modular architecture, technical debt, Decouple the authentication layer. A janitor. A woman who pushed a mop and emptied trash cans for minimum wage. How did she know what she knew? And more unsettling, why had her 90-second analysis felt more insightful than the 2-hour board meeting he'd just endured with his executive team? David Preston wasn't accustomed to feeling unsettled. He liked his world organized, hierarchical, predictable. Smart people had degrees and titles and executive offices. People who cleaned offices were, well, they were invisible. They weren't supposed to have insights that made you question everything. He pushed the thought away and returned to his analytics, but the numbers seemed even less meaningful now. Somewhere in the building below, Maya Santos was probably emptying trash cans and mopping floors, and somehow that felt wrong in a way David couldn't quite name. Over the following weeks, David found himself paying attention to Maya in a way he'd never paid attention to any service worker before. He started staying late deliberately, timing his work to coincide with her cleaning rounds. He'd watch her from the corner of his eye as she moved through his office, always quiet, always efficient, always careful not to speak unless spoken to. She'd learned her lesson from that first night. She never offered another insight, never looked at his whiteboards or computer screens, never gave any indication that she was anything other than exactly what her job title said she was. But David had seen something that night, a glimpse behind a carefully maintained facade, and he couldn't unsee it. His company continued its slow decline. Revenue dropped another 7%. 2 major clients didn't renew their contracts. David's chief technology officer resigned to take a job at a competitor. The board scheduled another emergency meeting. The 6-month deadline was now a 4-month deadline. David tried everything he could think of. He hired an expensive consulting firm that produced a 100-page report full of buzzwords and platitudes. He reorganized his management structure. He cut expenses and pushed his remaining team to work longer hours. Nothing helped. The company was a sinking ship, and David was running out of ways to bail water. And through it all, Maya Santos cleaned his office 3 times a week, invisible and silent, carrying a secret David couldn't quite figure out. It was a Tuesday evening in March when David's patience finally broke. He'd just gotten off a call with his largest remaining client, a financial services firm that represented 30% of his revenue, and they'd informed him they were exploring alternatives. It was corporate speak for, "We're leaving." David knew the company wouldn't survive, losing that client. He was staring at his computer screen, feeling something he'd never let himself feel before, genuine fear, when Maya knocked on his door and entered with her cleaning cart. David watched her for a moment as she began her usual routine. Then, impulsively, he spoke. "That thing you said about modular architecture, was that a real suggestion, or were you just, I don't know, repeating something you overheard somewhere?" Maya froze, her hand on his wastebasket. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. "It was a real suggestion, Mr. Preston." David leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You talk like an engineer, not just someone who knows terminology. You talk like someone who actually understands how systems work." Maya's expression was carefully neutral. "I used to understand how systems work. I don't do that anymore. Why not? Because that life cost me everything that mattered. And I decided I'd rather empty trash cans than pay that price again." The words were delivered quietly, without drama, but there was something in them, some deep pain barely contained, that made David pause. For the first time, he found himself seeing Maya Santos not as a curiosity or a mystery to be solved, but as an actual person with an actual story. But the moment passed. David's fear about his company reasserted itself, and his need for solutions overwhelmed any brief impulse toward empathy. "Listen," he said, his voice taking on its usual executive tone. "I don't care what your story is. If you actually know something that could help this company, I need to hear it. I'll pay you for a consultation. $200 for an hour of your time. You can tell me what you think is wrong and how to fix it." Maya shook her head. "I can't do that, Mr. Preston. Why not?" $200. Cash. For 1 hour. "Because I don't do this anymore," Maya said, her voice firm. "I made a choice to be exactly what I am right now, Someone who cleans offices and goes home and doesn't get involved in other people's problems. I'm sorry your company is struggling, but it's not my business to fix it. She returned to her cleaning, moving with deliberate focus, clearly hoping the conversation was over. But David Preston hadn't built a $50 million company by accepting no for an answer. He stood up and walked over to where Maya was dusting his bookshelf. "Let me tell you something about your job," he said, his voice dropping into a register that his employees would have recognized as dangerous. "You're a janitor. You make what, minimum wage? Maybe $12 an hour? I'm offering you $200 for 1 hour. That's more than you make in an entire shift. Most people in your position would jump at that opportunity." Maya stopped dusting and turned to face him. Her expression was still controlled, but something had changed in her eyes. "Most people in my position," she said slowly, "would appreciate being spoken to like human beings rather than economic units. But you're right, Mr. Preston. I am a janitor. I make minimum wage, and I'm happy with that, because it means I don't have to deal with people like you outside of the 3 hours a week I clean your office." David felt anger spike hot in his chest. He stepped closer, deliberately using his height advantage to intimidate. "People like me? I'm the CEO of this company. I employ hundreds of people. I built something from nothing while you were, what, failing out of wherever you went to school? Don't lecture me about respect when you're literally paid to clean up after successful people." Maya met his gaze, and for just a moment, David saw something blazing in those dark eyes: fury, pain, and something else that looked almost like pity. "You're right, Mr. Preston," she said softly. "I am paid to clean up after people. I empty their trash, I wipe down their desks, I make everything look neat and organized so they can come in the next morning and feel like they're in control of their world. And you know what I've learned doing this job? The people who yell the loudest about being successful are usually the ones who are most terrified that they're not. The ones who need to remind everyone of their titles and their achievements are the ones who deep down suspect that without those titles, they'd be nothing." "Excuse me?" David's voice was dangerously quiet. "Your company is failing," Maya continued, and now the words were coming faster, like a dam breaking. "And you know why? It's not because your technology is outdated or because your competitors are better. It's because you've created a culture where people are terrified to tell you the truth. You surround yourself with people who agree with you, and anyone who challenges you gets frozen out or fired. You ask me for help, but you don't actually want help. You want validation. You want someone to tell you that you're brilliant and your problems are someone else's fault." David felt his face flush with rage. He opened his mouth to shout something, probably to tell her she was fired, that he'd call her supervisor and make sure she never worked in this building again. But Maya wasn't finished. "I could tell you exactly how to save your company," she said, her voice still quiet but carrying absolute certainty. "I could design you a complete restructure that would cut your technical debt by 70%, improve your customer retention, and position you to compete with anyone in your market. I could do it in 3 months, and it would work. But I won't. You know why? Because people like you don't actually want to be saved. You want to be right. And I have no interest in helping someone be right while their entire team suffers for their ego." She picked up her cleaning cart and moved toward the door. "I quit," she added. "I'll leave my keys with the security desk. Find someone else to clean up after you, Mr. Preston. I'm done." And she walked out, leaving David Preston standing alone in his office, shaking with rage and, though he'd never have admitted it, the uncomfortable suspicion that every word she'd said was true. Maya Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway of Preston Technologies for the last time, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands were trembling. She'd spent 14 months being invisible, being silent, being safe. And she'd just blown all of that apart in under 5 minutes because some arrogant CEO had pushed exactly the wrong buttons. She reached the janitorial closet on the 42nd floor, put away the cleaning supplies, and changed out of her gray uniform in the small bathroom. Underneath, she wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. She caught sight of herself in the mirror. 28 years old. Dark circles under her eyes from working night shifts, hair that needed cutting, clothes that had seen better days. This wasn't who she was supposed to be. But then again, Who she was supposed to be had died 3 years ago in a hospital room in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Maya left the building, riding the elevator down 42 floors in silence, walking past the security desk where she left her keys and ID badge. The guard, Marcus, who'd always been kind to her, looked confused. "You leaving, Maya?" "New job," she lied. "Thanks for everything, Marcus." She stepped out into the cool Seattle night and started walking. She lived 14 blocks away in a studio apartment that cost $900 a month, nearly half her janitor's salary, and she'd gotten used to walking to save on bus fare. The city moved around her, cars rushing past, people heading to restaurants and bars, the sounds of a place that hummed with money and ambition and energy. Maya had been part of that world once. She'd been someone who belonged in gleaming office buildings, someone whose opinion mattered, someone with a future so bright that her professors at MIT had called her once in a generation. But that was before her mother got sick. Before Maya had made a choice that seemed so obvious at the time, family over career, love over ambition, being present over being successful. She'd left MIT 3 months before completing her PhD in computer science and artificial intelligence. She'd come home to San Diego to care for her mother, who was dying of pancreatic cancer and had no one else. For 6 months, Maya had been there for everything. Every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every good day and bad day. She'd held her mother's hand and read to her and made sure she wasn't alone. And when her mother died, peacefully, in hospice, with Maya beside her, Maya had felt something break inside herself that she didn't know how to fix. She was 25 years old, 3 months short of a PhD and utterly destroyed. The grief came in waves that knocked her off her feet. Maya stopped answering calls from her professors, from her research advisor, from the companies that had been courting her for 6-figure positions. She stopped looking at her MIT email. She stopped being the person she'd been before. For months, she'd drifted. She worked random jobs, barista, retail clerk, dog walker, not because she needed to work, but because she needed something, anything, to fill the hours that used to be filled with her mother. She wasn't suicidal, but she wasn't quite alive either. She was a ghost of the person she used to be, going through motions without understanding why. Eventually, she'd ended up in Seattle. No particular reason. It was far from San Diego, far from Cambridge, far from anyone who'd known Maya Santos, the genius, MIT's rising star, the girl who was going to change the field of artificial intelligence. In Seattle, she could be nobody. She'd gotten the janitor job because it required no thinking, no ambition, no future. She worked nights because she couldn't sleep anyway. She cleaned offices because making physical spaces clean and organized was the only kind of order she could control. And for 14 months, it had worked. She'd been invisible, anonymous, safe. She'd successfully become exactly what David Preston had assumed she was. Someone whose only value was the labor of her hands. Someone who didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, until tonight, when she'd let him see her. When she'd let herself be seen, and now everything was broken open again. Maya reached her apartment building, a shabby structure in Seattle's Central District that housed mostly service workers and students, and climbed 3 flights of stairs to her studio. The apartment was tiny but meticulously clean because even in her most depressed moments, Maya couldn't stand disorder. A single bed against one wall, a small kitchenette, a desk with a laptop that was 5 years old but still functioned, a bookshelf holding the few items she'd kept from her previous life, textbooks, research papers, a photo of her mother. She sat on her bed and stared at the wall. The smart thing to do would be to find another janitorial job. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her savings, from her 6 months of working at Preston Technologies and carefully living on almost nothing, totaled about $8,000. She could survive for maybe 6 months if she was careful. But something had shifted tonight. When she'd stood in David Preston's office and told him exactly what she thought of him, told him exactly how to save his company, felt the familiar rush of solving a complex problem in real time. Something had woken up inside her that she'd thought was dead. Maya walked over to her desk and opened her laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing her desktop background, a photo of Earth from space that she'd downloaded years ago because it reminded her that individual problems were tiny compared to the infinite universe. She opened a browser and began to search. Preston Technologies wasn't the only mid-sized tech company struggling right now. The market was full of them. Companies with good technology and bad execution. Brilliant engineers hamstrung by poor leadership. Products that could be revolutionary if someone just reorganized them correctly. Maya spent the next 4 hours researching. She looked at annual reports, customer reviews, technical documentation, investor presentations. She took notes in a style she hadn't used since MIT. Dense, technical, connecting patterns across multiple data sources. Her mind, which had been dormant for so long, roared back to life with a hunger she'd forgotten she possessed. By 3 a.m., she'd identified 12 companies that were facing the exact same problems as Preston Technologies. Companies with good bones but fatal execution flaws. Companies that were on the edge of failure but could be saved with the right intervention. And Maya Santos knew exactly how to save them. Or rather, she knew how to save one of them, and if she could prove it worked, she could save all the others. She opened a new document and began to write. The document was titled Modular Architecture Conversion, a Case Study. It was the solution she'd described to David Preston, expanded into a complete technical specification. Authentication and user management as an independent service. Core business logic modularized into separate containers. A 12-week implementation timeline with clear milestones. Cost projections showing a 70% reduction in technical debt within 6 months. It was brilliant. It was elegant. It would work, but Maya didn't have a company to implement it with. And even if she did, she had no money, no team, no resources. She was a janitor with a laptop and a half-finished PhD. She closed her laptop and lay on her bed as dawn light began to filter through her window. Somewhere in the city below, David Preston was probably waking up in his expensive apartment, preparing for another day of presiding over a dying company while pretending everything was under control. And Maya Santos lay in her tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. She was going to build something. Not for David Preston. Not for any of the 12 struggling companies she'd researched. For herself, she was going to prove that genius didn't require credentials or recognition or anyone's permission. She was going to build a solution so good, so undeniable, that the world would have to pay attention. And then, only then, would she decide who deserved to be saved. The next morning, Maya walked to the Seattle Public Library, a gorgeous glass and steel structure in downtown Seattle, and set up at a corner desk with her laptop. She had $43 in her checking account, $8,000 in savings, and an idea that could be worth millions if she could just figure out how to execute it. Step 1. Build a prototype. She couldn't afford cloud services or servers, so she'd have to work locally. She couldn't afford software licenses, so she'd use open-source tools. She couldn't afford a team, so she'd have to do everything herself. She spent the next 8 hours coding, breaking only to eat a sandwich she'd brought from home and to use the bathroom. The library closed at 8 p.m. Maya went home, microwaved a cup of instant noodles, and kept coding until 2 a.m. Then she slept for 4 hours, woke up, and went back to the library. This became her routine. Library from opening to closing. Code for 16 hours. Sleep for 4. Repeat. The prototype took shape slowly, an authentication service that could plug into any existing system, handle all user management, and make it trivially easy to add features like multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, and role-based access control. The kind of infrastructure that mid-sized companies desperately needed but struggled to build themselves, because it wasn't their core competency. Maya called it Keystone, because it was the fundamental piece that held everything else together. After 3 weeks, she had a working prototype. It wasn't beautiful and it wasn't complete, but it functioned. Maya created a demo video showing Keystone integrating with a mock e-commerce platform, adding enterprise-grade authentication in under 15 minutes. She posted the video on her personal website, a bare-bones site she built in 2 hours using a free hosting service, and shared it on a few technical forums. Nothing happened for 4 days. Then, on day 5, Maya received an email. The email was from a senior engineer at a Series B startup called Dataflow, a company Maya had identified in her research as struggling with exactly the kind of problems Keystone solved. The engineer had seen her video. He wanted to know if Keystone was a real product. He wanted to test it. Maya's hands were shaking as she typed a response. "Yes, it's real. I can provide a full technical demo." They scheduled a call for the next day. Maya walked to a coffee shop, bought the cheapest drink on the menu, and sat in the corner with her laptop and her phone. When the call came through, she answered with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Hello, this is Maya Santos. For the next 45 minutes, Maya walked the Dataflow engineer through Keystone's architecture, answered highly technical questions, and demonstrated the prototype in real time. The engineer, a man named Chris, who sounded both exhausted and desperate, kept saying variations of, "This is exactly what we need." At the end of the call, Chris asked the question Maya had been dreading. "What's your pricing model?" Maya took a breath. She'd spent hours researching how enterprise software companies priced their products. She knew the market rates, knew what a service like Keystone should cost. But she also knew she was a nobody with no credentials, no company, no track record. "For the first implementation," she said carefully, "I'm offering a performance-based model. You pay me nothing up front. I integrate Keystone into your system. And if it works, if it reduces your authentication-related bugs by at least 50% and speeds up your user onboarding, you pay me $15,000. If it doesn't work, you pay nothing." There was a long pause. Then Chris laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine disbelief. "You're serious? You'll do all the integration work for free on spec?" "I'm serious. I believe in this product. If I can't prove it works, I don't deserve to be paid." Another pause. Then, "Okay, let's do it. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," Maya said. She hung up, set down her phone, and realized her hands weren't shaking anymore. Over the next 6 weeks, Maya worked 18-hour days integrating Keystone into Dataflow's platform. She wrote code, debugged issues, rewrote entire sections when they didn't perform well enough. She communicated primarily with Chris, but occasionally other Dataflow engineers would join calls, and Maya could hear the skepticism in their voices. Who is this woman? Why is she doing this for free? What's her angle? Maya didn't have an angle. Or rather, her angle was simple. Prove it works, get paid, do it again. At the end of 6 weeks, Dataflow ran their metrics. Authentication-related bugs were down 73%. User onboarding time had improved by 42%. Customer complaints about login issues had dropped to nearly zero. Keystone worked exactly as Maya had promised it would. Chris called her, sounding almost giddy. "Maya, this is incredible." "I'm authorizing payment today. $15,000, as agreed. But listen, we want to keep using Keystone. We want to expand it to handle more of our infrastructure. Can we hire you as a consultant?" Maya felt something unlock in her chest, something that had been tightly compressed for 3 years. "I'm not available as a consultant," she said. "But Keystone is available as a product. I'm launching it as a standalone service. You can be my first official customer. What's the pricing?" Maya had spent hours working this out. $500 a month for up to 10,000 users. Scales from there based on usage. Month-to-month contract, no commitment required. If you stop getting value, you can cancel anytime. Done, Chris said immediately. "Send me the contract." Maya sent the contract, a simple agreement she'd drafted using free legal templates, and received a signed copy back within 2 hours. That evening, $500 appeared in her PayPal account. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was proof. Someone was willing to pay for what she'd built. Maya sat in her studio apartment that night and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years: pride. But one customer wasn't enough. She needed more. She needed momentum. She created a website for Keystone, still simple but professional, with case studies from the Dataflow implementation. She posted about it in technical forums, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. She cold-emailed CTOs at mid-sized tech companies offering the same deal she'd given Dataflow: prove it works first, pay only if satisfied. 3 companies responded. Maya gave them all the same pitch. 2 of them hired her. By the end of month 4, Maya had 5 paying customers and monthly recurring revenue of $3,000. By the end of month 5, she had 12 customers and was bringing in $8,000 a month. By month 6, she had 23 customers, $15,000 in monthly revenue, and a waiting list of companies that wanted to implement Keystone. The service worked. It solved a real problem, and word was spreading through the tight-knit community of mid-sized tech companies in Seattle and beyond. Maya quit going to the library and started working from coffee shops, then eventually from a co-working space when she could afford the membership. She hired her first employee, a junior developer named Priya who was brilliant but had dropped out of college and couldn't get hired at traditional companies. Maya didn't care about credentials. She cared about whether Priya could code. She could. By month 8, Keystone had 47 customers, $32,000 in monthly recurring revenue, and a team of 3. Maya, Priya, and a customer success manager named Terrell who'd been working in tech support and knew how to talk to frustrated engineers. By month 10, Maya had to incorporate as a real company. She called it Keystone Technologies. Her lawyer, a woman who handled startup incorporations on a sliding scale, helped her set up an LLC and open a business bank account. And then, in month 11, something changed. A venture capital firm based in San Francisco reached out. They'd heard about Keystone through their portfolio companies. They wanted to meet with Maya to discuss growth opportunities. Maya almost said no. She'd been avoiding anything that might require her to be in the spotlight, anything that might resurrect Maya Santos, the MIT genius. But she was also running out of runway. To scale Keystone to the next level, she needed capital, better infrastructure, more employees, marketing budget. She took the meeting. The VC firm, Meridian Capital, flew her to San Francisco, put her up in a nice hotel, and scheduled a pitch meeting with 3 of their partners. Maya put on the only professional outfit she owned, a blouse and slacks she'd bought for $30 at a thrift store, and walked into a conference room that overlooked the bay. For 45 minutes, Maya presented Keystone, the problem it solved, the market opportunity, the revenue growth, the customer retention rates, the technical differentiation. She spoke clearly, confidently, with the kind of command that came from deeply understanding her subject. When she finished, one of the partners, a man in his 50s named Robert, leaned back in his chair and smiled. Maya, this is one of the best pitches I've seen in 10 years. Your unit economics are outstanding. Your retention is off the charts, and you're solving a painful problem in a huge market. We want to invest. We're prepared to offer you $2 million at a $10 million valuation. Maya's heart was pounding. $2 million. It was more money than she'd ever imagined having access to. It could take Keystone from a scrappy startup to a real company with real infrastructure. But she was also terrified. Taking VC money meant giving up control. It meant growth expectations, board meetings, pressure to exit. It meant the kind of intensity and ambition that had once cost Maya everything. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Robert said. "Take a week. But Maya, this company is going to be huge. You should know that." Maya flew back to Seattle in a daze. She walked through Pike Place Market, buying herself an absurdly expensive cup of coffee as a celebration, then sat on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay and tried to figure out what to do. She could say yes to the investment and build something massive, or she could stay small, bootstrap, maintain control, but limit her impact. What would her mother have told her to do? The answer came clearly. Follow your gut. Do what feels right, not what feels safe. Maya called Robert the next day and accepted the investment. With $2 million in the bank, Keystone Technologies exploded. Maya hired a full engineering team, a sales team, a marketing manager. She moved the company out of her co-working space and into a real office in Seattle's South Lake Union neighborhood. She invested in better infrastructure, better security, better everything, and the customers kept coming. By month 14, Keystone had 200 customers across 12 states. By month 16, they had 500 customers and were processing authentication requests for over 2 million end users. By month 18, Keystone was the fastest-growing B2B SaaS company in the Pacific Northwest, and Maya Santos was being invited to speak at conferences, featured in tech publications, and courted by acquisition-hungry enterprises. But through all of this, Maya never forgot where she'd started. She never forgot the anger she'd felt in David Preston's office, the humiliation of being dismissed as just a janitor, the certainty that people like him didn't deserve to be saved because they refused to see the intelligence and dignity in people they considered beneath them. And then, in month 19, Maya received an email that made her stop breathing. The email was from Preston Technologies' board of directors. They'd heard about Keystone. They'd heard about Maya. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss potentially implementing Keystone across their entire platform. The email was signed by Jennifer Hartman, Preston Technologies, Chief Financial Officer, the same woman who'd presented the grim financial numbers at the board meeting Maya had overheard 19 months ago. Maya stared at the email for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up Preston Technologies' latest financial reports, which were publicly available since the company had taken some debt financing. The numbers told a story. Preston Technologies was dying. Revenue was down 34% year over year. They'd lost 60% of their customer base. Their technical debt had gotten so bad that they couldn't ship new features without breaking existing ones. The board had brought in a turnaround consultant 6 months ago. Nothing had worked. They were in their death spiral. And everyone knew it. Maya picked up her phone and called Jennifer Hartman directly. Jennifer Hartman speaking. "Hi, Jennifer. This is Maya Santos from Keystone Technologies. I got your email about exploring an implementation." "Maya!" "Thank you so much for calling back so quickly. Yes, we're very interested in Keystone. We've heard incredible things from peers in the industry. I'd love to set up a discovery call to discuss our needs." "I appreciate that," Maya said carefully. "But before we go any further, I need to know, does David Preston still work at your company?" There was a slight pause. "David is still our CEO, yes, though he's been working with our board on a transition plan." "Why do you ask?" "Because David and I have history," Maya said, "and I need to understand the dynamics before I agree to any meeting." "I see." Jennifer's voice had shifted, more cautious now. "Can I ask what kind of history?" "I used to work there," Maya said, not in a role David would remember. "But we had a conversation once that clarified some things for me." "Tell me something, Jennifer. Is Preston Technologies actually ready to change, or are you just looking for a technology band-aid to cover deeper problems?" There was a longer pause this time. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was quieter, more honest. "Between you and me, the company needs more than technology. We need a complete restructure, culture, leadership, strategy, everything. But the board is cautious about making dramatic changes because we're worried about spooking our remaining customers and employees. We thought maybe if we could fix the technology first, it would buy us time to address the other issues." Maya smiled, though Jennifer couldn't see it. It was exactly the kind of thinking that killed companies, trying to fix symptoms instead of root causes. "I'll take the meeting," Maya said. "But I want David Preston in the room, and I want to present to the full board, not just a committee. Can you arrange that?" Yes, I can arrange that." "May I ask why?" "Because if I'm going to help save your company, everyone needs to hear what I have to say, including and especially David." "All right," Jennifer said slowly. "I'll set it up. Would next Tuesday work?" "Tuesday is perfect," Maya said. "I'll see you then." She hung up and sat back in her chair. Her office, a real office now, with windows and a door and a desk that wasn't from IKEA, overlooked the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in that skyline was Preston Technologies building. Somewhere on the 42nd floor was David Preston's corner office. The same office where he'd told Maya she was just a janitor and mocked the idea that she could understand his business. Maya had 19 months to prepare for this moment, and she was going to make it count. The following Tuesday, Maya walked into Preston Technologies headquarters for the first time in over a year and a half. She wore a professional suit, not expensive, but well-fitted and confident. She carried a leather portfolio. She looked every inch the successful entrepreneur she'd become, The security guard at the front desk didn't recognize her. Why would he? Marcus had retired 6 months ago. To this new guard, Maya was just another tech executive coming for a meeting. She took the elevator to the 42nd floor, walked past the conference rooms where she used to empty trash cans, and entered the large boardroom where Preston Technologies' board met monthly. 9 people were already seated around the table: the 6 board members, Jennifer Hartman, the chief technology officer who'd replaced the one who'd resigned, and David Preston. David looked older than Maya remembered. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his hair had more gray. He looked like a man under enormous pressure, which of course he was. He didn't recognize her, not at first. He glanced at her with the kind of polite disinterest that executives reserve for people they're about to sit through a presentation with. Maya set down her portfolio and smiled at the room. "Good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me. My name is Maya Santos, and I'm the founder and CEO of Keystone Technologies." Jennifer reached out to explore whether Keystone might be a fit for Preston Technologies' infrastructure needs. "Before I present our capabilities, I want to share a bit of my background." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. It showed a photo of her at MIT, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in equations, next to her thesis advisor. 5 years ago, I was a PhD candidate at MIT studying artificial intelligence and distributed systems. I was 3 months from defending my dissertation when I left to care for my dying mother. After she passed, I struggled to find my way back to who I'd been. Eventually, I ended up in Seattle, working night shifts as a janitor because it was the only job I could handle at the time. Maya looked directly at David. His face had gone pale. He was staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. "About 19 months ago, I was cleaning an office on this floor when I overheard a board meeting. The company was struggling. The CEO was defensive. The technology was failing. I suggested a solution: modular architecture, decoupled services, reduced technical debt. The CEO told me I was just a janitor and dismissed my insights." The room was absolutely silent. Every person at the table was looking back and forth between Maya and David. Jennifer's expression suggested she was putting pieces together she hadn't known existed. "So I quit," Maya continued, "and I went home and built the solution I'd described. I called it Keystone. I implemented it for free for one company to prove it worked. Then I charged them $500 a month. Then I scaled to 5 customers, then 12, then 50. 19 months later, Keystone Technologies has 500 customers, $15 million in annual recurring revenue, and a 30-person team. We've raised $2 million from Meridian Capital, and we're on track to reach $50 million in revenue by next year." She advanced to the next slide, which showed Keystone's customer growth graph, a hockey stick that made several board members sit up straighter. "Preston Technologies is dying," Maya said bluntly. "You know it, your customers know it, the market knows it. Your current trajectory gives you maybe 8 months before you run out of options. But here's the thing, your problems are solvable. Your technology is good enough. Your team is talented enough. What you lack is leadership that's willing to admit when they're wrong and make hard decisions." She looked at David again. He looked like he might be sick. "Now, you asked me here to discuss whether Keystone can help save your company. The answer is yes, but not how you think. Your problems aren't just technical. They're cultural and structural. Implementing Keystone would be a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. What you actually need is a complete restructure, new leadership, new strategy, new priorities." And honestly, Maya smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "I'm not sure Preston Technologies deserves to be saved." One of the board members, an older woman named Carol, leaned forward. "Ms. Santos, if you think we don't deserve your help, why did you take this meeting?" Maya met her eyes. "Because I wanted David Preston to see what happens when you dismiss someone's intelligence based on their job title. I wanted him to see that the janitor he mocked built a company worth more than his will ever be. And I wanted him to understand that genius doesn't require permission or recognition. It just requires opportunity and courage." She closed her laptop and picked up her portfolio. "But I'm not just here for revenge. I'm here to make you an offer. Keystone Technologies is interested in acquiring Preston Technologies. We'll purchase the company, retain your employees, honor your customer contracts, and integrate your technology into our platform. In return, we'll pay $1 for the company and assume all debts. The room exploded. Board members talking over each other, Jennifer looking shocked, the CTO looking confused, and David Preston sitting very still, staring at Maya with an expression that might have been horror or awe or both. Carol raised her hand for silence. Mrs. Santos, why would we sell our company for $1? Because, Maya said calmly, your alternative is bankruptcy in 8 months. This way, your employees keep their jobs. Your customers get a working product. Your legacy doesn't end in complete failure. And, she looked at David again, you learn what it means to have someone show you mercy you don't deserve. She walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. You have 1 week to decide. If you say no, that's fine. Keystone will be just fine without you. But if you say yes, I have one condition. David Preston steps down as CEO and accepts a position as a junior consultant reporting to my head of operations. Minimum wage, 6-month probationary period. If he can prove he's capable of actual humility and growth, we'll consider promoting him. Maya met David's eyes one final time. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. You have my number. And she walked out, leaving chaos in her wake. For the next week, Maya didn't hear anything from Preston Technologies. She'd expected that. Decisions like this required time, debate, probably legal consultation. She went about her normal work. Product development meetings, customer calls, investor updates. She didn't tell her team about the Preston Technologies offer. It felt too personal, too tangled up in her history to share publicly yet. On day 6, Jennifer Hartman called. Maya? It's Jennifer. The board has voted. We're accepting your offer. Maya had expected this. But hearing it still sent a jolt of something through her. Vindication. Maybe, or justice, or the simple satisfaction of being proven right. All the terms? She asked. All the terms, Jennifer confirmed, including the condition about David's role. He's agreed to it. He agreed to work as a minimum wage consultant? It took some convincing, but yes. I think he understood that this was the only path forward that didn't end in complete disaster. Maya leaned back in her chair. Okay, let's schedule the paperwork. I'll have my lawyer coordinate with yours. Maya? Jennifer's voice was softer now. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you doing this? You could have just walked away. Let us fail. You've already won. You've built something incredible, proved everyone wrong. Why give David Preston a second chance he probably doesn't deserve? Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking about her mother. Thinking about the months after her death when Maya had been broken and lost and had somehow found her way back to herself. Not because she deserved another chance, but simply because life had kept moving forward and she'd moved with it. Because, she said finally, holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather spend building something good. And because maybe, David can actually learn and grow and become someone better. Or maybe he can't, and we'll part ways in 6 months. Either way, I'll know I gave him the same chance I wish someone had given me when I needed it. That's remarkably generous, Jennifer said. It's not generous, Maya corrected. It's strategic. I'm getting a solid tech platform, a talented team, and an established customer base for essentially nothing. David's redemption arc is just a bonus and a test to see if he's worth keeping around long-term, Jennifer laughed. Fair enough. I'll see you next week for the signing. The acquisition closed 30 days later. Keystone Technologies acquired Preston Technologies for $1 plus assumption of debts. Every employee kept their job. Every customer contract was honored. The technology was integrated into Keystone's platform within 90 days. And the combined company revenue hit $20 million annual recurring rate by the end of the year. And on a Monday morning in August, David Preston reported for his first day as a junior consultant at Keystone Technologies. Maya watched from her office as David checked in with HR, received his badge and laptop, and was given a tour of the office by Terrell, who'd been promoted to Director of Customer Success and who had no idea that this new consultant was a former CEO of a company Keystone had acquired. Maya had debated whether to meet with David that first day. Part of her wanted to savor the moment, the complete reversal of their positions, the sweet satisfaction of seeing someone who'd dismissed her now working under her. But another part of her, the part that had learned something in the months since she'd walked out of his office with her. Cleaning cart. Knew that revenge was empty if it didn't lead somewhere better, so she waited until the end of David's first week. Then she called him to her office. David knocked on her door at exactly 4 p.m. as scheduled. He looked different than he had at the board meeting, less polished, more uncertain. He was wearing business casual instead of a suit. He looked like any other junior employee, nervous about a meeting with the CEO. "Come in, David," Maya said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat down carefully. "Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Santos. You can call me Maya. We're not that formal here." "Okay, Maya." He took a breath. "I want to say something before we talk about whatever you called me in to discuss." Maya nodded. "Go ahead." "I'm sorry," David said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry for how I treated you 19 months ago. I'm sorry for dismissing your intelligence, for using your job title as a weapon, for being exactly the kind of person who makes the world worse instead of better. I've had a lot of time to think about that night, about the choices that led my company to fail, about the kind of leader I was, and I'm ashamed. Not just because you were right about everything, though you were, but because I was cruel, and cruelty is never justified no matter how stressed or scared you are." Maya studied him. The apology sounded genuine, but she'd learned to be skeptical of words without actions. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "But words are easy. I'm more interested in what you do going forward. You're here as a junior consultant on probation. Your job is to support our customer success team, answering technical questions, helping with implementations, making sure our customers get value from our products. It's not glamorous. It's not CEO work. Can you handle that?" "I can handle it," David said. "Or rather, I'll learn to handle it. I know I have a lot to prove." "You do," Maya agreed. "And I'm not going to make it easy for you. But here's what I'm offering: a genuine chance to grow, to learn what it means to serve instead of command, to see the business from the bottom up instead of the top down. If you can do that, if you can be humble enough to learn from people you would have dismissed a year ago, then maybe you become valuable in a different way. Maybe you become someone worth promoting." She leaned forward. "But if you fall back into your old patterns, if you're condescending to the team, if you treat this like punishment instead of opportunity, if you act entitled to anything other than the minimum wage we're paying you, then you're gone. No second chances after this second chance. Clear?" "Crystal clear," David said. "Good." Maya handed him a folder. "This is your assignment for the next 2 weeks. We have a customer, a financial services firm, that's struggling with their implementation. I want you to work with Priya and figure out what's going wrong and how to fix it. Your report is due at our team meeting 2 weeks from today." David took the folder. "I'll get started immediately." As he stood to leave, Maya called after him. "David, one more thing." He turned back. "The person who's going to teach you the most over the next few months is Priya. She's 24 years old, never finished college, and is a better engineer than anyone who worked at Preston Technologies. I hired her because she could code, not because she had credentials. If you can learn from her without ego getting in the way, you might actually become someone useful." David nodded slowly. "I understand." After he left, Maya sat at her desk and felt, not triumphant exactly, but something close to peaceful. She'd built something from nothing. She'd proved her worth to herself, not to anyone else. And now she was giving someone who'd wronged her a chance to become better, not because he deserved it, but because she could afford to be generous. Her mother would have been proud. Over the following months, something surprising happened. David Preston actually learned. He worked with Priya, and at first it was clearly difficult for him, taking direction from someone so young, admitting when he didn't understand something, asking for help instead of pretending to know. But gradually something shifted. Maya would see them working together in the common area, David taking notes while Priya explained some technical concept, both of them laughing at some inside joke about code. David attended the weekly team meetings, and at first he sat silent in the back. But over time he started contributing, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. His insights were actually useful. He understood business strategy in ways that Keystone's younger team didn't, and when he shared that knowledge without arrogance, people listened. By month 3, David had become genuinely valuable. By month 4, he'd helped close a major customer deal by understanding their business needs better than anyone else on the team. By month 5, Terrell specifically requested David for the toughest customer escalations because David had learned how to listen instead of dictate. Maya watched all of this with interest. She didn't trust it completely. People could fake growth for a while, but the consistency was impressive. At the 6-month mark, Maya called David back to her office. "Your probation period is up," she said. "We need to decide whether to keep you on permanently or part ways." David nodded. He looked calmer than he had 6 months ago, less like he was carrying the weight of a failed company and wounded ego. "I want to stay," he said, "if you'll have me. I know I still have a lot to learn, but I think I'm finally learning how to learn, if that makes sense." "It does," Maya said. She pulled out a folder. "I've gathered feedback from everyone you've worked with over the past 6 months. Want to hear what they said?" "Yes," David said, though he looked nervous. Maya opened the folder. "Priya says you're coachable, which from her is high praise. Terrell says you're the best person on the team at de-escalating angry customers because you actually listen to what they're upset about. Jennifer, who stayed on to help with the transition, says you've changed more in 6 months than she saw you change in 6 years at Preston Technologies." She closed the folder and looked at David directly. "I'm promoting you to senior consultant and giving you a team to lead. Not because you've earned redemption, you haven't, not completely, but because you've earned an opportunity to keep growing. Your salary goes to $75,000 annually. You report to Terrell. You continue to prove you can lead by serving instead of commanding." David's eyes were wet. "Thank you, Maya. I don't know how to properly express what this means." "Don't express it," Maya said. "Just keep doing the work. That's all any of us can do." 2 years later, Keystone Technologies had grown to 1,200 customers, 80 employees, and $75 million in annual recurring revenue. Maya had been featured on the cover of Forbes magazine in an article titled "The Janitor Who Built an Empire." Meridian Capital had led a Series B round that valued the company at $200 million. And David Preston, former CEO, current senior consultant, was leading Keystone's customer success division with a team of 15 people who respected him not because of his title, but because of how he treated them. On a Tuesday afternoon, Maya was in her office reviewing the quarterly board presentation when there was a knock on her door. David poked his head in. "Have a minute?" he asked. "Sure, come in." David sat down across from her. He looked different than the man who'd started as a junior consultant 2 years ago. More relaxed, more genuine, more comfortable in his own skin. "I wanted to give you something," he said, pulling an envelope from his bag. "I've been working on it for the past 6 months, and I wanted you to see it before anyone else." Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a manuscript, maybe 60 pages, nicely bound. The title page read, "From CEO to Consultant, What I Learned by Losing Everything." She looked up at David. "You wrote a book?" "More like an extended essay," he said. "About the past 3 years. About how success made me arrogant, how failure humbled me, how working at Keystone taught me what leadership actually means. I'm thinking of publishing it, but I wanted your permission first. Your story is a big part of it, and I wouldn't feel right sharing it without your approval." Maya flipped through the pages. She saw chapter titles like "The Night I Met a Genius and Dismissed Her," "Learning to Serve Instead of Command," "What My Youngest Team Member Taught Me About Intelligence." "Can I read it before deciding?" she asked. "Of course. Take your time. No pressure." Maya spent that evening reading David's manuscript. It was honest in a way she hadn't expected. Unflinchingly critical of his own failures, generous in acknowledging what he'd learned from others, humble about the journey. He wrote about the night he'd dismissed Maya, about watching his company fail, about the bitter pill of accepting a minimum wage job from someone he'd mocked. But he also wrote about what came after, the slow process of letting go of ego, the surprising joy of being part of a team instead of commanding one, the discovery that his worth wasn't tied to his title. He wrote about Priya teaching him to code, about Terrell teaching him to listen, about Maya teaching him, by example, not lecture, what real leadership looked like. The final chapter was titled Gratitude. In it, David wrote, Maya Santos saved my life, though not in the way either of us expected. She didn't save me by implementing Keystone at Preston Technologies. She saved me by letting Preston Technologies fail completely, then offering me a chance to rebuild myself from scratch. That chance? Working for minimum wage, reporting to people younger and smarter than me, having to prove my value through actions instead of credentials, was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Not because it was easy or comfortable, but because it was exactly what I needed to become someone worth being. Maya closed the manuscript and sat for a long time, thinking. The next day, she told David he could publish it. 3 years after Maya bought Preston Technologies for $1, Keystone Technologies was acquired by a major enterprise software company for $800 million. Maya's team, including David, received significant payouts. The employees who'd worked at Preston Technologies and survived the acquisition now found themselves with stock options that had turned into real wealth at the acquisition celebration party, held at a nice restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. Maya stood to make a toast. The room quieted, 80 employees and their partners watching her. 3 years ago, Maya said, I was cleaning offices for minimum wage, invisible and ignored. I was hiding from a past that hurt too much to remember, and a future that seemed too frightening to pursue. And then someone pushed exactly the wrong button, and I got angry enough to stop hiding. She looked around the room. I built Keystone because I wanted to prove that genius doesn't require permission, that you don't need credentials or recognition to create value, that the smartest person in the room might be the one everyone's overlooking. And you know what? We proved it. Together. She raised her glass. To everyone in this room who took a chance on a company led by a janitor turned CEO. To everyone who believed that how you treat people matters more than what title you hold. And to the journey we've been on, from impossible to inevitable. Thank you. The room erupted in applause and cheers. People clinked glasses, hugged, laughed. Maya made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations, until she found herself face to face with David. Congratulations, Maya, he said quietly. $800 million. That's quite a journey from cleaning my office. It is, Maya agreed. And congratulations to you, too. I hear your book is doing well. It's selling okay. But more importantly, I've been getting emails from people who read it and say it helped them rethink how they approach leadership. That means more than the money, Maya smiled. You've changed a lot, David. I had a good teacher, he said. Even if she mostly taught by letting me fail until I figured things out myself. That's the only kind of teaching that actually works, Maya said. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party continue around them. Can I ask you something? David said finally. Sure. Do you regret those 14 months working as a janitor? If you could go back and skip that part, go straight to building Keystone, would you? Maya thought about it. No, she said finally. Those 14 months taught me something important. That your worth isn't determined by how other people see you. It's determined by how you see yourself and what you choose to do with that understanding. I was invisible, but I wasn't worthless. And remembering that, really internalizing it, made me a better founder than I would have been otherwise. How so? Because I don't dismiss people based on their job titles or credentials. Because I hire for character and intelligence, not pedigree. Because I built a company where everyone matters, not just the people at the top. Priya, Terrell, you all got opportunities here you wouldn't have gotten elsewhere, because I know what it's like to be overlooked. She looked at David. And because I learned that giving people second chances, even people who don't seem to deserve them, sometimes leads to the best outcomes. You're proof of that. David's eyes were bright. Thank you, Maya, for everything. For the chance you gave me. For the patience you showed. For not giving up on me when a lot of people would have. I won't forget it. I know you won't, Maya said. That's why I gave you the chance in the first place. As the party wound down and people started to head home, Maya found herself alone on the restaurant's outdoor deck, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city glittered with lights, each one representing someone's life, someone's dreams, someone's quiet struggle to matter. She thought about her mother, who would never know how this story ended, but who had taught Maya the most important lesson of all, that love means being present, even when presence costs you everything else. Maya had given up MIT for her mother, and she'd do it again without hesitation. But she'd also found her way back to herself. In her own time, on her own terms, she thought about David, who'd learned humility the hard way and become someone worth knowing in the process. She thought about Priya and Terrell and all the people who'd joined Keystone because they believed in the mission, not just the paycheck, and she thought about herself, Maya Santos, former MIT genius, former janitor, current entrepreneur, future unknown. The journey had been strange and painful and ultimately triumphant, but the triumph mattered less than the journey. She'd found her way back to who she was supposed to be, not by ignoring the pain, but by walking through it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Priya. "Boss, you coming back inside? We're doing karaoke and Terrell is murdering a Beyoncé song." Maya smiled and headed back inside to join her team. Sometimes the smartest person in the building is the one everyone ignores. Sometimes genius hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Sometimes the people we dismiss are the ones who change everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the janitor becomes the CEO, and the CEO becomes someone better than he was. And everyone learns that worth isn't about titles or credentials or how much money you make. It's about character, kindness, and the courage to keep growing even when growth is painful. Maya had learned that. David had learned that. And maybe, just maybe, everyone who heard their story would learn it too. What did you think of David and Maya's story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below. My favorite moment was when Maya walked into that boardroom and David finally realized who she was. The look on his face must have been priceless. What was your favorite moment? And what would you have done in Maya's position? Would you have given David a second chance, or would you have let him face the consequences without any help? Let me know in the comments. If this story of hidden genius, second chances, and discovering that true worth has nothing to do with job titles touched your heart, subscribe to Deep Stories for more emotional tales that move you and make you think. New stories every week. Stories that remind us that the people we overlook might be the ones who change everything, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from revenge, but from grace.